Good evening. Once again, another edition of Health Talk, sponsored by the Nevis Renal Society in collaboration with Vaughan Radio. And I'm here alone tonight. My partner, Dr. Tivon Browne, unfortunately couldn't make it tonight, so I will be carrying the show all by myself. So it's Health Talk. And last time we were here, we started talking about the condition that damages the kidney. You know, we are the Renal Society and our focus is on kidney health and trying to prevent the scourge of end-stage renal failure, ending up in dialysis or requiring transplant, which can be very costly, cumbersome care. So prevention is the best cure. And so we want us to focus on healthy lifestyle, healthy living, healthy eating, because believe it or not, diabetes and hypertension has a lot to do with our diet and how we eat and what we eat, and not paying attention to details. These conditions can creep upon us unannounced. They are called silent killers in the early stages, and that's why we need to pay attention to certain pertinent features of these conditions so that we start to monitor at an early stage, because early detection leads to a good outcome. And once we understand the dynamics between diet and lifestyle and how they could lead to kidney damage because of hypertension, diabetes, and other conditions which damages the kidneys, then we can begin to put in place measures to prevent or to mitigate when things have gone off track. So, how do we monitor our kidneys? How do we monitor for diabetes, which is one of the most common conditions after hypertension? And the two together will be like a triple whammy, because the effect multiplies. And so if you have diabetes and hypertension, then the chances of the kidneys being damaged, if these conditions are not properly controlled, is almost tripled. And so we need to be understanding of how to monitor for these conditions damaging the kidneys. And last time we began to speak about a particular test which we want everyone hearing my voice tonight to make note of. That particular test. It is a way to evaluate the chronicity of the blood sugar. You know, the blood sugar will rise and fall with every meal, with activity, and with medication. It will rise and fall. But the average blood sugar over a period of time can be monitored by a test called the hemoglobin A1C. It is a shortened name for glycosylated hemoglobin. So what is glycosylated hemoglobin? Okay, glucose is a molecule that is very reactive. It sticks on to proteins. And so that combination of glucose and proteins is called glycosylation. I'll spell it out for you. GLYCOSYLATION. You can Google it. Ask Dr. Google. He will give you a lot of information about glycosylation. So it's the binding of glucose to proteins. And why is that important? Because proteins form the backbone of the human economy. They are for structural usage and for functional usage. Our muscles, our ligament, our tendon, our bones have protein as a basic component of their structure. Our enzymes, our hormones, antibodies, surface membrane, are made up of proteinaceous structures. And so protein is found everywhere in the human body. And when glucose is stuck on to protein more than is expected, then these proteins lose their functionality. So the enzymes don't work well, the hormones don't work well, the antibodies don't work well, the cell membranes become leaky, they become damaged, and that damage is widespread throughout the body. Multiple organs are affected when you have a high degree of glycosylation. And so we need to monitor this, because the glycosylation depends on the average blood sugar. We can't avoid it, but the body can control it by keeping the sugar from going too high. But in diabetics, that fine control of keeping the sugar within a predefined range is lost. So we have to find another means of keeping the sugar within the normal range. Normal range is between, say, 60 and 110. When you starve, the sugar goes down to about under 100, between 100 and 60. When it goes below 60, then there's a reaction that triggers in to bring it back up. So the body keeps it in that close range between 60 and 110. So when the sugar goes too high, especially after a meal, we have insulin. Insulin is the one hormone that drives nutrients out of the bloodstream into the cells, into the storage sites where they are processed. When insulin is deficient or lacking or not working properly, then the blood glucose will increase dramatically. And we need glucose because it's the source of energy. We need it, but you have to keep it controlled in a certain range. So when we have no insulin, and that's how we define diabetes, lack of insulin, the sugar rises unpredictably, erratically, depending on how much we eat, what we eat, how we exercise, and our medication. We have lost that fine control, that buffer during the effect of insulin. And so diabetics have to find another way of keeping the sugar from going too high or going too low. So when the sugar goes high and stays high for a long period of time, then the glycosylation increases. And that glycosylation now becomes a problem, because, as I said earlier, it damages protein. The protein that got stuck up with glucose, they lose their functionality. And that is the danger that we want to prevent by keeping your blood sugar within the normal range. And so how do we measure glycosylation? There's a protein which is neatly packaged. It's found in red blood cells. And that protein is called hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is found in red blood cells. It circulates in the bloodstream, and then, like all other proteins, it becomes stuck on with glucose. But we can't test all the proteins in the body. As I said, proteins are everywhere, but we can easily measure hemoglobin because it is found in red blood cells. And these red blood cells have a finite lifespan in the circulation. They're made in the bone marrow, and they last for about 3 months. And red blood cells are dying all the time. They're being replaced all the time, and so there's a constant circulation of red blood cells. But the average lifespan of red blood cells is 3 months. And so that fact has been used to monitor the rise and fall of glycosylated hemoglobin, or hemoglobin A1C. And those scientists who discovered and made that correlation, we have to take our hats off to them, because once we keep the sugar within normal range, the hemoglobin A1C will stay between 3 and 5 or 3 and 6%. That's the normal range of hemoglobin A1C, between 3 and 6%. But in diabetics, it can go up to 16, 18% sometimes, and that is quite alarming, because the sugar has been running out of control for quite a while to reach up to 7, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%. And so that monitoring of the hemoglobin A1C gives us an idea as to how long the blood sugar has been running higher than it normally should. And so, based on the life cycle of hemoglobin, we are advised to check the hemoglobin A1C at least once every 3 months to see how well or how fast it is rising. And if the sugar is well controlled, it should not increase if the sugar is not well controlled, then it will gradually increase from 5% up to 6%, 7%. When it reaches 7%, the experts recommend that we must take action to bring it back into the normal range. So 7% has become the benchmark for monitoring hemoglobin A1C to bring it back under control. For diabetics, they allow a little increase between 6 and 7%, but once they get to 7%, then we should take action to bring it under control. And those actions will include diet, exercise, medication, as the case may be. Your good doctor will explain to you what is unique for your situation. So that is hemoglobin A1C in a nutshell, because it measures the average blood sugar over the last 3 to 6 months. And it takes away the panic from managing diabetes, because the blood sugar will rise and fall with every meal. But if we do the right things and eat properly, exercise accordingly, take our medication, and monitor, especially after meals. If you monitor the blood sugar after meals, we could get an idea as to how well controlled the blood sugar is excuse me, normally. And the advice is that after a meal, 2 hours after a meal, your blood sugar should be 160 or less. If at 2 hours after a meal your blood sugar is more than 160 milligrams per deciliter, then it means that you have consumed too much carbohydrates or too much sugar converting food in that meal. Because in normal person, the blood sugar should return to normal within an hour of eating a meal. That's the normal response, and they allow a little lag. So in diabetics, they said 2 hours the sugar should be 160 or less. And so I tell my patients to mark those two numbers, 60 to 160. Your fasting shouldn't be lower than 60, or if your sugar go below 60, you will have problems with hypoglycemia. The brain can't function, the muscles can't function. But the bad thing is that when the sugar is high, the brain and muscles don't care, because they live on sugar. But the other organs, the other tissues can be affected, because the sugar being too high, then it could damage the cell membranes, the antibodies, the enzymes, the hormones that have protein in them. Then these structures can become damaged by high blood sugar when it goes too high, over 160. So keep the sugar between 60 and 160. It shouldn't go over 160 at 2 hours after a meal, and it shouldn't go below 60 at any time. But normally, once the sugar starts dropping below 70, 60 to 60, there's a response that kicks in to bring it back up. And so the body have that mechanism. Even in diabetics, you get what they call hypoglycemic reaction. You get sweating, tachycardia, anxious, nervous, and if you don't get something sweet, you could slip away into hypoglycemic coma. When the sugar is high, you could survive high blood sugar for a long time without knowing, and that is the danger. Because the high blood sugar, you won't know unless you go testing for it. It could be high up in the 200, 600 for months and weeks and years without you knowing. But then when you do check and the A1C is over 8%, 7%, mean that your end organs are in danger, because the proteins in those organs, the membrane protein, the antibodies, they have been all damaged and they lose their functionality. You get a cut, it takes long to heal. You get an infection, it runs through your body like wildfire, because your antibodies can't work properly, your white blood cells can't work properly. And so, because the proteins that cause these structures to function have been stuck up with glucose, and so they lose their functionality, and that's the danger of high blood glucose. It is very subtle, very subtle. You won't know until you get a crisis, and then the body takes long to heal, the infection takes long to go away, and then when you look and behold, you have diabetes. You get a cut, you get all kind of strange infections, and you do a test, the sugar is high, you have diabetes, because you have not been monitoring. Yet you felt well, because the brain and muscle will keep functioning when the sugar is high. But when the sugar is low, brains and muscles can't function. You can't concentrate, you can't walk, you can't talk, you're just weak. Because the brain and muscles need sugar. for them to function. And they don't need insulin to use sugar because they have a direct draw from the blood for the sugar. But the other tissues, they will limp along until you meet a crisis and then the system crashes. So, monitoring your blood, your hemoglobin A1C is critical, very crucial to optimal health in diabetics. And it has become a standard of care in this era to monitor your A1C. Ask the doctor about A1C. Every time you go for your annual checkup, make sure that test is on the panel, because it will give you an idea as to how chronically elevated your blood sugar has been. If the A1C is under 6%, then you're good to go. If it's up to 7%, you need to take action with your diet, your medication, get more physically active to keep the average sugar from being so high. And there's a rule of thumb that for every percentage rise in the A1C, it equates to 35 milligrams on average increase in the blood sugar. So an A1C of 7% will give you an average blood sugar of 160, 170 thereabout, because the average blood sugar should be about 110, between 100 and 110. So if the A1C reach up to 7%, means that your average blood sugar is about 110 plus 35, so about 145 to 150, and that is danger. And so if the A1C reach up to about 8%, means that your average blood sugar is about 200, or between 180 and 200. And so it is good test to know. I love to order it since I get to understand about it. And if you come to me, you know that once we question you about diabetes or we screening for you, we will ask to do that test, because it gives us very valid information about the chronicity of your blood sugar, how high it has been on average. And so ask your doctor about it, get to know about it, go and Google it up, and then we can have a conversation going on. So I will take a break for station identification. This is Health Talk by the Renal Society in collaboration with Vaughan Radio.
You're listening to Vaughan Radio from the Federation of St. Kitts Nevis.
And we are back. Now, before we get back into the discussion on A1C, I just want to give you some news about the Renal Society. We are having a big event coming up in 2 days' time. On the 21st of June, we have our annual walkathon, where we are raising funds. You know, we have that event every year around this time, between Whit Monday and now. So, and we're having a walk from the Malcolm Gishard Park along the Island Main Road up to Cahoon Junction, then we go up to Barnesgut and come down to Jessop's and back to Malcolm Gishard Park. So hope to see you there. You can get your package from any member of the Renal Society, your t-shirt, get registered, sign up, and if you missed the t-shirt because they're all gone, then you could still come on the walk, right? There'll be a lovely, healthy, snacky breakfast at the end of the walk. Fruits and water. So try to provide healthy snacks. So join us 4 annual walkathon, burn off some of those calories. When you eat and your sugar rises, then you go on a jog, and you could, if you have a glucometer, you can test before and after. You'll be amazed to see how much exercise could bring down your blood sugar if it goes too high. And that's why first line of treatment is diet and exercise. And if you get more active, control how much carbs you put into your stomach, then you could control how much the blood sugar will rise by just controlling your diet. And so I have had patients who didn't want to go on tablets, they didn't want to go on insulin. We sat them down and we tell them how to manage their diet, how to count their calories, count their carbs, balance the diet, and within a month or two, the A1C was back to normal. And some have gone for years without being on any medication. I know one patient went away, the A1C was in double digits, and they came back and they were scared, like mad, because while they were abroad, they were started on insulin and metformin, and they didn't want to go on any medication. So they understand how to, they were caterers in their business, sat them down and explain to them how to plan their meals, how to balance their meals in terms of the carbs and proteins, fibers, fat, etc. And to this day, 3 years later, their blood sugar, A1C, is still normal because they stick to their diet, they go for walks every morning, and their blood sugar has remained normal. They have the glucometer, they monitor before meals and after meals, and keep the blood sugar from overshooting. And so, if you have a glucometer, for heaven's sake, make the best use of it, right? Don't just check the fasting alone, because if your fasting is normal or near a little bit high, you may get the feeling, oh well, things are alright. But the danger is after eating, because we eat to get energy, and the energy comes from the food that we eat, and it is translated into sugar. The food is digested to release the sugar locked away inside it. And so you may have a lovely meal of yam, breadfruit, potato, rice, whatever. All these are carbohydrate food, and they will break down to release sugar into your bloodstream. So if you have a heavy carbohydrate diet, then you could sure bet the blood sugar will go up significantly after that meal. So to control your blood sugar from rising too high, you could cut less carbs, have a little more protein, a little more fat. Fat are a good source of energy as well, and they have more calorie dense than proteins and carbs. And you have more complex carbs, fibers, okra, string bean. There are some carbs, some protein, some fibers, but the sugar won't rise too high. When you have all these refined carbohydrates, flour, processed food, whether it be corn flour, breadfruit flour, once it is processed, you have to take away the fiber from the carb, and you dump highly refined carbohydrates, which convert to sugar very quickly when they absorb into the stomach. So if you want to have carbs, have the carbs in the unprocessed state. Just breadfruit, cassava, without going to the milling process. They have some sugar, but it will be slowly released. But once it has been milled, grounded up, then you have to strip away the fiber, and the carbs will release the sugar more rapidly. So natural carbohydrates in a natural state, without much processing, is far healthier because they have more fiber content. But whether it is processed or not, you have to monitor after eating, because once you put that carb into your intestinal tract, it will absorb into the bloodstream in the form of sugars. Glucose is the main sugar that the body uses, but there are other sugars as well. You have fructose, lactose, galactose, sucrose. But these sugars, they convert to give energy. And that's how the body gets energy, from the sugars in the food that you consume. So people ask, where the sugar comes from? Me eating the sugar, but you're eating carbohydrates, you're eating bread, you're eating rice, you're eating pasta, you're eating banana, plantain, All these are carbohydrates, so they will add up, and the sugar will not be controlled if you have an abundance of carbs in your diet. The advice is that you should have no more than 3 carbs on your menu plate. Some people may have 4 or 5. You have rice, you have sweet potato, white potato, plantain, macaroni pie, all in one meal, right? And then you have a sweetened drink, and you may have some pastry as well. So you have about 8 carbs there, So no wonder some of us, our sugar can't get controlled because we over consume too much carbohydrates in our diet. So my advice to you folks, enjoy your meal, but watch the sugar afterwards. Monitor the sugar 2 hours after eating. Get out your glucometer, stick your finger. If the sugar is 2 hours is more than 160, you have consumed too much carb in that diet. You better go on the Mundo track and start burning it off, right? Or else you cut back on the next meal. Okay, so that's the value of having your own glucometer, that you could monitor your blood sugar. And if the sugar stays over 160, goes up to 200, then the average sugar is rising over time, and the A1C will increase. And you do the A1C, and it is over 7%, you know that you're in trouble. Some people could cheat the lab, right? They could do the right thing before the test, and when you come back, the lab, the fasting is normal. But if you do the A1C, the A1C is over 6.5, 7%, that, the fasting is just that, it's normal, but it's, the average sugar over the last 3 months was higher than normal. So the A1C, you can't cheat for it. You have to cheat for 3 months straight for it to come back to normal. But for the blood sugar itself, you could do the right thing the day before you go to the lab test and get a normal result. But the A1C, you can't do it like that. You got to be cheating for 3 months straight to bring it back to normal. And that is a good thing, because if the sugar is kept normal for 3 months, then you're on a winning streak. So, my folks, ask the doctor about hemoglobin A1C and have that test done at least once every 3 months if you are diabetic. If you're not diabetic, maybe once or twice a year, you could have it checked as a spot check to see how you're doing. And once it remains under 6.4%, then you know that you are not doing too badly. If you get up to 7%, beware. Okay, and get to know what's normal. Normally between 3 and 6%. Up to 7%, 6.5%, you're in danger. 7%, you take action. And so, my folks, this talk has gone on. I hope you enjoy my rambling tonight, and that what I had to say means something to you. And we're thankful to Tivon Radio and the Navy Funeral Society for sponsoring this program. And we'll see you on the walk on Saturday to burn those calories, get your sugar down. And so you take care until we come again next month. And Dr. Browne, wherever you are, hope you enjoy me alone ranger tonight. Okay, folks, bye for now. We are out of here.
You were just listening to Health Talk, sponsored by the Nevis Renal Society in collaboration with Tivon Radio.